Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Forum for a Better Understanding. For the past couple of weeks, we've been sharing around a very important meeting that was held at the Vatican in October of 2010. It was called The Catholic Church in the Middle East, Communion and Witness. And it was an important meeting that the Pope had called to discuss the issue of Christianity and its survival in the Middle East. We're continuing and today concluding that series with two more guests who are going to be sharing from their own experience and conviction their own hopes and dreams and prayers for peace in this part of the world where they have both lived. To my left is Mark Shirin, a deacon who is serving the community of Holy Trinity Armenian Apostolic Church here in Fresno. He owns Ventura TV and Appliance and is a generous underwriter of another one of our programs, Vision for the Future, here at Channel 49. To his side is the Imam Sayyid Ali Ghazvini, who is the spiritual leader of the Islamic Cultural Center here in Fresno. He has been there for 7 years guiding that community, and it's always a privilege to have Sayyid Ali with us on these panels. Thank you both for being here. Now, as we start, Mark and Sayyid Ali, could we begin by having you tell us why this issue of the survival of Christianity in the Middle East is important to you and to the rest of us who perhaps have no relatives there, have not lived there, but we still have a connection to our faith's roots in the Middle East. Mark.
Well, for the Armenians, the Middle East represents hospitality. When the Armenians, after the genocide of 1915, were persecuted and exiled into the deserts of Deir ez-Zor in Syria, the Arab countries were hospitable, opened their doors. Syria and Lebanon accepted all these Armenian refugees, and they've been hospitable to the Armenians and granted them citizenship, and they became working and strong citizens of the countries of the Middle East. Of course, from a Christian perspective, you know, the Middle East is the cradle of Christianity. Jesus walked in Lebanon and Palestine. Those were his. That was the beginnings of the church in Jerusalem. It has significance to all three religions: the Jewish religion, the Islam religion, and also Christianity. So the Middle East is an important for us. The Armenian Church is a guardian of the holy places in the holy city of Bethlehem and Jerusalem. So, and Armenians have for centuries lived in those areas. It's important that Armenians stay in those areas and that other Christian denominations also stay.
Thank you, Mark. Imam.
Well, for Muslims, protecting the faith and freedom of other religions is part of our faith. The Quran mentions Christians and Jews as the people of the book. The Prophet was the first one to start the tradition of meeting with leaders of other faiths and protecting the diversity of religious groups in our faith is very important. You know, even Muslims, there are certain divisions within Islam. So it is really important for us to protect this diversity, religious freedom in the Middle East and in the Muslim world in general. And also, you know, Muslims and Christians in the Middle East have a lot of common history. Many Christians, scholars, has contributed to the literature, to the science, to different aspects of the civilization in the Middle East. So it is really important for us to see Muslims and Christians and people who follow the other religions enjoy the freedom and the security and the peace they need in that area.
What we're going to be discussing today, obviously, is how the violence has happened most recently, even as we were recording the program today. We are knowing that we have just had more violence in Egypt. There was that awful massacre in Iraq. So we are very aware of the difficulty of working out a peaceful solution to the situation. Mark, you know where we left off last week, and you have some more slides and pictures that would introduce us to Aram I and the important meetings that the Armenians have had with the Muslim community, both in Iran, and also in Lebanon. Do you want to start walking us through that?
Sure. I'd like to talk about the Catholicosate of Cilicia, which is located in Lebanon, led by His Holiness Aram I, Catholicos, has put a special emphasis on the need for Christian-Islam dialogue. Aram I, the Catholicos, has been the vice moderator of the World Council of Churches for many years and has been a proponent of ecumenism, but at the same time stresses the need for this Islam-Christian dialogue. And he is also the chair of the Middle East Council of Churches, which also has Muslims are directly participate in those meetings. We've had several meetings. The first meeting, actually it was the third meeting, took place in Iran. And I think we have some pictures of the opening ceremonies. That's the opening, the special banner that was designed for the Christian-Muslim dialogue. And then we see another picture of the attendees there. His Holiness is the one with the hood in the center of the picture, and that took place in Tehran in 2008. And I think there's another picture, another view there of some of the Muslim participants. Maybe Imam can recognize some of those people.
I think there is an official sitting next to His Holiness there. I don't know his name, but I think he's one of the government officials. Yeah.
So this dialogue continues. It's also, we've had meetings in Lebanon recently in 2010. I think we have a couple pictures of that meeting, which basically the same participants. His Holiness is in the center there. And then we also have this was taken after the conclave, and then this was one of the working sessions participating. And it was interesting to note that not only Muslim representatives that were men, but there was also women representatives at this meeting. So the Catholicosate of Cilicia puts a lot of emphasis on the necessity for dialogue. His Holiness believes that this is utmost importance to us Christians in the Middle East, is to have dialogue because we're neighbors. We live in the same cities, we live in the same neighborhoods, and this era of globalization, we're together already. So why not look for common values, common history, and accentuate the things we have in common as opposed to what divides us?
I'd like to read the propositions that came out from the meeting that I said was so important in the Vatican in October, and then have the Imam respond, because at this meeting it was participated obviously by Christians and Muslims. They were invited by His Holiness to participate. Here's the conclusion that they drew in Proposition 40 of 44. Christians in the Middle East are called upon to pursue dialogue with the followers of other religions, bringing hearts and minds closer together. For this to happen, then, along with their partners, are invited to work to fortify interreligious dialogue, to strive for the purification of memory through the forgiveness for the events of the past, and to seek a better future together. Now, in their daily lives, they are to endeavor to accept one another in spite of their differences, working to build a new society in which fanaticism and extremism have no place. The Synod Fathers would like to see drawn up a formation plan which helps people to be more open, for use in teaching establishments as well as in seminaries and novitiates. This will help build a culture of dialogue based on human and religious solidarity. Imam, I know that you, as a moderate, have been teaching us for the last 7 years in Fresno, this is how we work together. Help us to appreciate what probably needs to happen in the Middle East so that this will happen there, as we've seen such wonderful relationships built between our diocese and the Islamic community of Fresno. How could that happen in Iraq, in Iran, and in Lebanon, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia? Help us appreciate what needs to happen.
I'm so glad that in this conclusion of the conference in the Vatican, they mentioned the relationship between Christian and Muslims, and they emphasized on the importance of dialogue. Not only dialogue, but also putting together a plan for cooperation and working together. This is very vital. We cannot escape this fact that if we want to have a peaceful communities and security and peace for all of us, we need to break this wall of not communicating with another, establish this dialogue and understanding, and maybe establish a hotline. This is very important. We live in a time that, unfortunately, politics and violence are doing a great dramatic changes. So we need this high level of communication at different levels of the clergies, different faiths. Without this, we cannot promote a global peace. So it's not an option for us.
No.
It's if we want a peaceful relationship and life, this is something we need to do. I was in Mecca and Hajj 2 months ago when the tragedy happened in Baghdad in the Chaldean church. And believe me, every single Muslim or a clergy or a scholar I met there were shocked to hear about this tragedy in Baghdad. They said, this is the work of devil. It cannot be a human who've done this. And recently, the same thing happened in Alexandria in the Coptic church. Again, we offer condolences to the families, to all Coptic community, to all the Christians about what happened. We stand in solidarity with those. We need to put together a plan to work together and go beyond interfaith dialogue. We need to ask the politicians, government authorities to join us in implementing what Christians and Muslims conclude and agreed to, like a plan, to implement that. Because if we sit together and talk, and this is not going to be implemented somewhere, it will be only ink on paper, as they say. We want the governments, the authorities in the Muslim world and in the West to really make an effort in implementing what the conclusions or the resolutions of these conferences make. So this is an important step that we need to take.
It is. Right now, what we have to take a step is a break in our program. But please don't go anywhere, because within 60 seconds, we'll be back with part 2 of this program with Mark Shirin and Sayed Ali Ghazvini. Stay tuned.
KNXT TV is proud to say thank you to all its viewers who have given their support for over 25 years. And only through your support is KNXT able to provide spiritual and informative programming. Please remember KNXT in your long-term support through wills, bequests, trust, and plan giving. Your gift is important to the future of Catholic television. Help preserve the strength of KNXT's message based on the teachings of Christ. Keep KNXT in your future plans.
Thank you for joining us again for the second part of our program. We're in the middle of a very important point in our discussion over how it is that Christianity and Islam will help each other reach a really important point of beyond dialogue. Mark, you had an insight you wanted to share about the importance with the Imam of moving beyond what we've done before.
Well, I think one of the statements that His Holiness Aram I made echoed exactly what the Imam said, and that is that beyond the theoretical and beyond the ink on paper, conferences and occasional get-togethers in this dialogue, we need to turn that into concrete steps for real cooperation. And we have to involve not only the leaders at the very high levels, but also on the community level, and get these community leaders, political leaders, religious leaders together and on a regular basis. So it's not just occasional and left to chance, but concrete, structured get-togethers where we can exchange our ideas and develop that mutual trust. And based on that mutual trust, we can have a lot of cooperative endeavors, and one is the fight against extremism and fanaticism. That's a danger. That's not just a danger to the Christian communities. No. That's a danger to Islam itself. And it's ironic that during the time of this attack on the Syrian Catholic Church, and I think we have a picture there of the Syrian Catholic family with the priest, and they're in mourning over this tragedy that happened. And the first phone call that His Holiness Aram I received was from the Grand Mufti of Lebanon, Sheikh Mohammed Kabani. He called, and as Imam said, at the Hajj, the leadership of the Muslims were outraged by what happened. So this outrages all of us, not just Christians. And if we could work together and cooperate on a concrete level, we can combat this, because this is a danger to the stability of the Middle East.
You know, there's this thing that happened on the news, believe it or not, the same day that we are recording this program. Ahmed Al-Tayyib, who is the Grand Imam at the Al-Azhar University, probably the most important university in Northern Africa. It is necessary that all Egyptians, and I do not want to say Muslims or Christians, but just Egyptians, are needed today more than at any other time in the past to join their hands together and, as has happened previously, embrace the crescent and the cross to stand against such conspiracies that have targeted Christians today, but which tomorrow will not differentiate between Muslim and Coptic. And Imam, you were telling me that there was a follow-up to that very news bulletin of an action that actually showed that there is a possible alternative to what we're used to.
Let me remind you about Dr. Ahmed Al-Tayyib. He is actually the head of Al-Azhar. Al-Azhar is the supreme authority, religious authority for Sunni Muslims in the Sunni world. So he's the highest authority for Muslims. In fact, I also read in the news today that Muslims and Christians in Egypt, in Cairo, were demonstrating against violence. Muslims were carrying the gospel, and Christians were carrying the Quran. This is a symbol of unity and being one family. Jim, Muslims and Christians in the Middle East, they live together as one family. My teacher for math was a Coptic teacher in high school. My best friend in high school was an Armenian boy. And when we visit many villages in Syria and Lebanon, you see a mosque right next to it, a church. A Catholic church, and maybe there is a Maronite church next to it. So in one village, 10,000 people, 1/3 of them are Christians and one third are Muslims, and the other third are from different, and they intermarry, they go to the same school, they eat the same food, and as Mark said, violence and terrorism is not a threat to one religion, it's to everyone, to the civilization actually. I don't know, this terrorism and violence that we are inflicted, it's a global phenomenon. It attacks every form of civilization, and especially they attack places of worship. Contrary to what is known in the West, the most victims of terrorism are Muslims, and whether in Iraq, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in different areas. So terrorism is a tragedy, and that we all need to work together as Muslims, Christians, Jews, other faiths, to fight this phenomenon and stand in solidarity against it.
Mark, you did mention that the Cardinal Deli would be someone you maybe wanted to show us and maybe tell us what his impact has been with the church in Iraq.
Cardinal Deli is the cardinal of the Chaldean Church, which is a Catholic church, and he's also a patriarch of that church. And not all patriarchs are cardinals. We have two. There's Cardinal Deli, and the other patriarch that I know of this cardinal is Nasrallah Sfer in Lebanon. But I think the Imam had some personal knowledge of Cardinal Deli.
Cardinal Deli is a very moderate, open-minded cardinal in Iraq. I got to know him through the media and through his speeches. Very open-minded, and in fact, we sent him condolences on what happened in Baghdad recently. He has visited the highest Shia authority in Najaf, Ayatollah Sistani, if you have heard.
Yeah.
And they have a very close relationship. You see, when leaders get to meet one another, there is actually no trouble, no problems. It's politics and those extremists who try to disturb the global peace. But the wisdom you see in religious leaders, whether Shia Muslims, Sunni Muslims, Catholics, Coptics, Armenian, you find a very pleasant wisdom in their thoughts, and you feel the peace, you feel the spirituality in that. So Cardinal Deli is one of these leaders that we are blessed to have in the Middle East.
It was people like Cardinal Deli who were at this meeting that included so many of the major leaders, not only of the Roman Catholic Church, though the Pope called the meeting, and though it was important for the Catholic Church, it included many, many Orthodox and selected Muslim leaders. Now, one result of the documents that we're looking at is Proposition 42, which is called On Islam. And it might be good to hear what the Pope himself said. Interreligious and intercultural dialogue between Christians and Muslims cannot be reduced to an optional extra. It is, in fact, a vital necessity on which, in large measure, our future depends. And then he goes on to say much of what we've already said around this table, that in the Middle East, Christians share a common life and a common destiny with Muslims. Together they build up society. It's important that we now promote the notion of citizenship, the dignity of the human person, equal rights and duties and religious freedom, including both freedom of worship and conscience. So I want to just thank the panel for what we've been able to remind our viewers that there is definitely a tradition of being able to live together for centuries, and that these are really aberrations. What's going on now is not what's always gone on. It's rather a fanatical group that is undermining what most people want. we only have a few minutes, but is there one or two final thoughts, Imam, that you know you wanted to make clear, and either repeat what was already on the table once or bring up anything that you know we need to hear for our viewers?
I also heard that His Holiness the Pope is planning for a bigger interfaith conference recently. That was in the news. What I would like to say is that hopefully political leaders of different countries will attend and listen to the wisdom that those leaders are going to say and implement that, and also offering the peace and the security every individual on earth needs to practice his or her own faith.
Mark, a final thought?
Well, I'd just like to tag on to what Imam said and what's happening in Lebanon. I think we have one more shot of a picture of the Muslim-Christian dialogue that happens on a local level in Lebanon itself, and that's the Christian Muslim Dialogue Committee, and they meet on a regular basis. Wow. This happens to be at our Holy See with the Catholicos sitting in the center. But that has to happen on the local level in addition to higher levels, so we can accentuate the common things that we have between the two religions.
Well, I want to thank Mark Shirin for being on all three of our programs which dealt with Christianity in the Middle East, and with the Imam Sayyid Ali Ghazvini, who joined us today to offer that Muslim perspective that is so important to hear reinforced: moderation. Till next week, God bless.